sweat trickles down your spine. Your heart pounds against your chest like a drum. Your throat tightens, and suddenly the simple act of breathing becomes a conscious effort. We've all been there, in that moment when fear grips us so tightly that the world seems to shrink, leaving us trapped in a prison of our own making. But what if I told you that this very sensation, this paralyzing fear that holds you back, is nothing more than a paper tiger? A shadow on the wall that appears monstrous but dissolves the moment you shine a light on it. Every morning, millions of people wake up to face their fears. They stare at the ceiling, their minds racing with thoughts of what could go wrong. The promotion they won't pursue, the relationship they won't start, the business they won't build, the life they won't dare to live. And in that moment they make a choice, though most don't realize they're making it. They choose to let fear write their story. Think back to your childhood. Remember when you first learned to ride a bicycle? That mixture of excitement and terror as you gripped the handlebars, your knuckles white with determination. The ground seemed so far below, the possibility of falling so real. But something remarkable happened in that moment. Something that holds the key to everything we'll discuss today. You felt the fear, acknowledged its presence, and chose to pedal forward anyway. What happened to that courage? When did we start letting fear have the final say? I once met a man who spent 30 years at a job he hated. Every morning he would put on his tie like a noose around his neck, drag himself to work, and count the minutes until he could leave. When I asked him why he stayed, his answer was revealing. I was afraid of starting over. Afraid of failing. Afraid of what others would think. 3 decades of his life, governed by fear. But here's what's fascinating about fear. It's the only emotion that becomes smaller when you confront it. Every other emotion tends to grow when you feed it. Happiness multiplies when shared. Anger intensifies when dwelled upon. Love expands when expressed. But fear shrinks in the face of action. Consider this. The human brain processes fear in the amygdala, a tiny almond-shaped structure that hasn't evolved much since our ancestors were dodging saber-toothed tigers. It can't tell the difference between a physical threat to your life and the anxiety of public speaking. It treats them both as survival situations. This means that every time you let fear stop you, you're letting a prehistoric alarm system designed for physical dangers dictate your modern life choices. Let me share something with you that might change your perspective forever. In extensive studies of people at the end of their lives, researchers found that the #1 regret wasn't about failures. It was about the things they never tried, the chances they didn't take, the dreams they let fear steal from them. When people look back on their lives, they don't regret the times they tried and failed. They regret the times fear prevented them from trying at all. But what exactly are we afraid of? Let's break it down together. There's the fear of failure, that crushing worry that we might pour our heart and soul into something only to see it crumble. But have you ever considered that failure isn't your enemy? It's your teacher, your guide, your stepping stone to success. Every single achievement in human history was built on a foundation of failures. Then there's the fear of judgment, that nagging voice that whispers, "What will they think?" But who are they? And why have we given them such power over our lives? The truth is, most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to spend time judging yours. And those who do judge, they're usually the ones too afraid to pursue their own dreams. Perhaps the most insidious is the fear of success. Yes, you heard that right. Many people are actually afraid of succeeding, because success means change, and change means leaving our comfort zone. Success means new responsibilities, higher expectations, and the pressure to maintain that success. But isn't that a wonderful problem to have? A young woman I met. She had a dream of becoming a writer since she was a little girl. She filled notebooks with stories, had ideas that kept her up at night, but never showed her work to anyone. For 15 years, she kept her passion hidden, afraid of criticism, afraid of rejection, afraid of not being good enough. One day, she found one of her childhood notebooks, and written inside was a story about a brave knight who faced dragons. The irony struck her. She could write about courage, but couldn't find it within herself to share her gift with the world. That day, something changed. She realized that by letting fear control her life, she wasn't just denying herself. She was denying the world whatever value her stories might bring. She started small, sharing her work with a local writing group. Yes, there was criticism. Yes, there were rejections. But there was also growth, improvement, and eventually success. The key lesson here isn't about writing. It's about recognizing that fear is a compass. It points directly to the things we need to do for our growth. When you feel fear about something that isn't physically dangerous, that's often a signal that you're on the brink of something important. What fears are holding you back right now? Take a moment, really think about it. Is it the fear of starting that new career? The fear of ending a relationship that no longer serves you? The fear of speaking up in meetings? The fear of pursuing your passion? Now imagine yourself 10 years from now looking back on this moment. Which would you regret more, trying and facing temporary discomfort, or letting fear rob you of what might have been? You see, fear isn't just an emotion, it's a choice. Every time you feel fear, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads to temporary comfort and long-term regret. The other leads through discomfort to growth, achievement, and fulfillment. The most successful people aren't fearless, they're fear conquerors. They feel the same fears you do, but they've developed the habit of acting anyway. They've learned to recognize fear for what it really is, a signal that they're pushing their boundaries, growing, evolving. Consider the simple act of speaking up in a meeting. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your voice might shake, but you speak anyway. The next time, it's a little easier. And the next time, easier still. This is how courage is built. Not through the absence of fear, but through action in the face of it. Think of fear like a muscle. Every time you face it, you grow stronger. Every time you back down, it grows stronger. The choice is yours. Will you be the trainer or the trained? There's a story that perfectly illustrates the power fear holds over our lives. In a small farming community, there lived a family who, for generations, never ventured beyond their county lines. The grandfather had once told his son that the family's place was on their land, that the outside world was too dangerous, too unpredictable. The son passed this fear to his children. 3 generations, bound not by physical chains, but by the invisible restraints of fear. Until one day, the youngest daughter decided to question this inherited fear. She asked herself a simple but profound question. What if everything I'm afraid of is just an illusion? She packed a small bag and took a bus to the neighboring state. Know what she found? People. Just people. Living, laughing, struggling with their own fears, fighting their own battles. The monster she'd built in her mind simply didn't exist. This is what fear does to us. It creates elaborate illusions, convincing us that the unknown is automatically dangerous, that stability equals safety, that comfort equals happiness. But here's the truth that might shake you to your core. The most dangerous place you can be is in your comfort zone. Because while it feels safe, it's actually a slow decay of your potential, a gradual dimming of your light. Let's talk about something that few people discuss, the price of fear. Not just the obvious costs like missed opportunities or unfulfilled dreams, but the deeper, more insidious price we pay. The slow erosion of self-respect that comes from knowing we're living beneath our potential. The quiet desperation of watching life pass by while we stand paralyzed on the sidelines. The bitter taste of what if that flavors our quiet moments. Have you ever noticed how fear compounds? How one small surrender to fear makes the next surrender easier? It's like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering size and momentum. Each time we let fear win, we reinforce the belief that we're not capable, not worthy, not strong enough. We build our own prison, brick by brick, fear by fear. But here's what's remarkable about the human spirit. It never completely loses its yearning for freedom. Even in those who've lived with fear for decades, there remains a small flame of courage, waiting to be fanned into a fire. Think of the times in your life when you've been truly proud of yourself. Weren't they all moments when you faced your fears? When you stepped into uncertainty with nothing but faith in yourself and the courage to try? Those moments reveal your true nature, not the fearful person you sometimes believe yourself to be, but the courageous soul you truly are. Let me share a truth that might change your life. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is simply energy. Like electricity, it's neutral, neither good nor bad. It's how you channel it that matters. The same energy that paralyzes one person galvanizes another. The same fear that keeps one person small drives another to greatness. Consider the performer who feels intense fear before stepping on stage. One might cancel the performance, retreat to safety, reinforce their fears. Another channels that same energy into their performance, using it to heighten their awareness, sharpen their focus, fuel their passion. The fear is identical. The response makes all the difference. This brings us to a crucial understanding. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. The goal is to develop a new relationship with it, to see it not as a wall, but as a door, not as a stop sign, but as a signal that you're on the right path. How do we develop this new relationship with fear? It starts with understanding that fear in most cases is simply a misused imagination. When we feel fear about a future event, what we're really doing is using our creative power to vividly imagine worst-case scenarios. But if we can use our imagination to create fear, can we not also use it to create courage? Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel fear about something, take a moment to notice what you're imagining. Are you running a mental movie of failure, rejection, or disaster? Now, with the same mental energy, create a different movie. See yourself handling the situation with confidence. See yourself succeeding. See yourself growing stronger through the challenge. This isn't about positive thinking or denying the possibility of negative outcomes. It's about reclaiming your power to choose which possibilities you'll focus on and draw energy from. Remember the fundamental truth about fear. It exists only in thoughts about the future. Fear cannot exist in the present moment. When you're fully engaged in the present, taking action, there's no room for fear. This is why action is fear's greatest enemy. Let me share with you the story of a man who worked as a bank teller for 25 years. Every day he would watch entrepreneurs come in to make their deposits, and every day he would feel a mix of envy and fear. He had a business idea, a simple innovation in home gardening that he truly believed could help people. But fear kept him behind that counter, watching others live out their dreams. One day he overheard a conversation between two successful business owners. One was telling the other about their early failures, about times they nearly went bankrupt, about the countless mistakes they made. But here was the surprising part. They were laughing about it. They had learned to see their failures not as devastating endings, but as necessary steps on the path to success. That day, something shifted in the bank teller's mind. He realized that his fear of failure wasn't protecting him. It was guaranteeing his failure by preventing him from even trying. The next day, he started working on his business plan after his shift. Within 6 months, he had a prototype. Yes, there were setbacks. Yes, there were moments of doubt. But he had learned to see fear as a signal that he was growing, stretching, becoming more than he had been. The most powerful shift happens when we stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I succeed?" When we stop focusing on what we might lose and start focusing on what we might become. When we realize that the real failure isn't in falling down, it's in letting fear keep us from ever standing up. Your fear tells you stories. Stories about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve. But here's the liberating truth. You don't have to believe these stories. You can write new ones. You can create a new narrative where fear is not your jailer but your challenger, not your enemy but your teacher. The human spirit has an extraordinary capacity for courage. It's woven into the very fabric of our being, waiting to be awakened. Think about this. Every single person who has ever achieved anything meaningful first had to overcome fear. Every great leader, every innovator, every person who has ever made a difference in this world faced moments when fear threatened to stop them. A small restaurant owner who taught me one of the most profound lessons about fear I've ever learned. His establishment was a tiny place, barely 8 tables in a quiet neighborhood. Every day he would serve the same regular customers, make the same dishes, live the same safe existence. But he had a dream. He wanted to expand, to create something bigger, something that could touch more lives. One afternoon, as we sat talking over coffee, he shared something remarkable. He said, "You know what I realized? My fear of expanding isn't really about losing money or failing. It's about success. I'm afraid that if I succeed, I'll have to become someone new, and that terrifies me more than failure ever could." This insight strikes at the heart of why fear holds such power over us. Often, what we're really afraid of isn't failure, it's transformation. We're afraid of becoming someone new, someone different, someone we don't recognize. But isn't that exactly what growth requires? Consider the caterpillar. If it feared transformation, if it clung to its identity as a crawler, it would never become a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't know what's happening when it enters the chrysalis. It simply surrenders to the process of transformation. There's a profound lesson here for all of us. Fear tries to convince us that we are fixed entities, that who we are today is who we must always be. But that's the greatest lie fear tells. You are not fixed. You are not finished. You are not bound by your past or your present circumstances. You are, in every moment, in the process of becoming. Let's talk about something that few people understand about fear: its relationship with time. Fear has a peculiar way of distorting our perception of time. It makes the future seem more threatening than it is, the past more defining than it should be, and the present moment more dangerous than it actually is. A time when you were about to do something that frightened you, perhaps giving a speech, asking for a promotion, or confronting a difficult truth in a relationship. In the moments before, fear painted elaborate pictures of disaster. But once you were in the moment, actually doing the thing you feared, where was the fear? It diminished, didn't it? Because action and fear cannot coexist in the same moment. This leads us to a powerful truth. The antidote to fear isn't courage, it's action. Courage is not something you wait to feel before taking action. Courage is what you discover you had after taking action. I once knew a teacher who spent 20 years teaching third grade. She was excellent at it, beloved by her students and respected by her peers. But she had a secret dream. She wanted to become a guidance counselor to help troubled teens find their way. For 20 years, fear kept her from pursuing this dream. "I'm too old to change careers," she'd say. "What if I'm not good at it? What if I lose everything I've built?" One day, she heard about a student she had taught 15 years ago. This former student had become a counselor, inspired by a moment when she, as his teacher, had helped him through a difficult time. Something clicked in her mind. She realized that fear had been robbing not just her, but all the young lives she could have impacted in a different way. She enrolled in night classes for her counseling degree. Was it easy? Did she feel fear? Every single day. But she discovered something remarkable. The fear never went away, but it became irrelevant, because she had found something more powerful than fear: purpose. This brings us to another crucial understanding about fear. It loses its power when it comes up against a strong enough why. When your purpose is bigger than your fear, fear becomes background noise rather than a stopping point. A parent whose child is in danger. In that moment, do they stop to consider their fears? Do they weigh the risks? Their purpose, protecting their child, completely overshadows any fear they might feel. This teaches us something vital about overcoming fear. Find a purpose bigger than yourself. Let me share a perspective that might change how you view fear forever. Fear is often a sign that you're on the right path. If your goals and dreams don't scare you at least a little, they're probably not big enough. If you're never afraid, you're not growing. If you're never uncomfortable, you're not challenging yourself. Consider this: every major breakthrough in human history was preceded by fear. The first person to sail across an ocean, to climb a mountain, to challenge an accepted truth. They all faced fear, but they refused to let it be their master. They understood something that we all need to understand. Fear is not a wall, it's a compass. It points directly to the areas where we most need to grow. Here's a powerful exercise I want you to try. Make a list of your fears, not just the big ones, but all of them. Now, next to each fear, write down what that fear is costing you. Be specific. If you're afraid of public speaking, what opportunities are you missing? If you're afraid of starting your own business, what dreams are you deferring? If you're afraid of vulnerability in relationships, what connections are you sacrificing? This inventory of fear's cost in your life can be a wake-up call. Because while facing our fears may be uncomfortable, the cost of letting fear run our lives is far greater. It's the cost of unlived dreams, unopened gifts, untapped potential. But here's something crucial to understand. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. The goal is to build a relationship with fear where it becomes a consultant rather than a dictator, where it becomes information rather than a command, where it becomes a challenge to rise to rather than a signal to retreat. How you would treat a child who was afraid. Would you berate them for their fear? Would you tell them they're weak for being afraid? Of course not. You would acknowledge their fear, validate their feelings, but gently encourage them to face what scares them. Why not treat yourself with the same compassion? There's a powerful story about a young violinist who dreamed of playing in one of the world's greatest orchestras. She practiced relentlessly, devoted her life to her craft, and finally got an audition. But as she stood backstage, her hands trembling, her breath shallow, fear threatened to overwhelm her. In that moment, she remembered something her first teacher had told her. Fear and excitement are the same emotion. It's your mind that decides which one it is. She took a deep breath and made a conscious choice. She decided that the trembling in her hands wasn't fear, it was excitement. The butterflies in her stomach weren't anxiety, they were anticipation. And something remarkable happened. Her performance transformed. She played with passion, with presence, with power. She got the position. This story teaches us something profound about fear. We have more control over it than we think. The physical sensations of fear, racing heart, shallow breath, trembling hands, are identical to the sensations of excitement. The only difference is the story we tell ourselves about what those sensations mean. The same physical response that makes one person run away makes another person come alive. The difference isn't in the sensation, it's in the interpretation. This is where your power lies. Let me share with you what I call the 3 truths about fear. These insights have the power to transform your relationship with fear forever. Truth number 1. Fear is not a fact. It's a forecast. When you feel fear about something in the future, remember that you're not dealing with reality. You're dealing with a prediction, and predictions can be wrong. How many times have you feared something that never happened? How many disasters have you imagined that never came to pass? Fear is your mind's attempt to protect you by imagining potential dangers. But your mind can be overzealous in its protective duties. Truth number 2. Fear grows in isolation and diminishes in connection. When we keep our fears to ourselves, they grow larger in the dark of our minds. But when we bring them into the light, when we share them with others, something remarkable happens. We often find that others have faced the same fears and overcome them. We find strength in shared experience, courage in community. Truth number 3. Fear is often a sign of alignment with your true path. Think about it. We don't feel fear about things that don't matter to us. We feel fear when something is important, when something matters deeply. Your fear can be a compass pointing toward your true north. Consider this story. In a small town, there was a librarian who had spent 30 years helping others find their stories. But she had a story of her own, burning inside her, yearning to be told. Every night she would sit at her typewriter, fingers hovering over the keys, fear holding her back. What if her story wasn't good enough? What if people judged her? What if she failed? One day, while organizing books, she came across a quote that changed everything. The only failure is not trying. She realized that by letting fear stop her from writing, she was already living her worst fear, the fear of never trying, never knowing, never giving her gift to the world. That night she sat down at her typewriter again. The fear was still there, but this time she saw it differently. She saw it as a sign that she was finally doing something that mattered to her. She wrote one page, then another, then another. The fear never completely went away, but it became her companion rather than her master. This brings us to a crucial understanding about fear. It's not about being fearless. It's about learning to move forward with fear as your companion rather than your guide. Think of fear like weather. It's present, it's real, but it doesn't have to determine your direction. Here's a practical strategy I want to share with you. The 5-second rule of fear. When you feel fear holding you back from something you know you should do, count backward from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then move. Take action. Any action. The counting serves 2 purposes. It interrupts the fear pattern in your mind, and it creates a launch sequence for action. But let's go deeper. Let's talk about the root of most fears, the fear of not being enough, not smart enough, not talented enough, not prepared enough, not worthy enough. This core fear manifests in different ways, but at its heart, it's always the same story. I'm not enough. Here's the truth that can set you free. You are not your fear. You are not your doubts. You are not your past failures or your future worries. You are the awareness that observes these things. You are the consciousness that can choose how to respond to them. Water can exist in different states, liquid, solid, gas. But regardless of its form, its essential nature doesn't change. Similarly, you may experience fear, doubt, or uncertainty, but these are states you pass through. They are not who you are. Let me share another powerful tool, the fear inventory exercise. Take out a piece of paper. Draw a line down the middle. On the left side, write down your fears. On the right side, write down the cost of letting that fear control you. Be specific, be honest, be thorough. Now, look at that list. Really look at it. See how fear has been silently directing your life, making decisions for you, keeping you small. This awareness is the first step to freedom. Because once you see how fear has been controlling your life, you can begin to take back control. But here's the key. You don't have to tackle all your fears at once. Start with one. Choose one area where fear has been holding you back and decide to act despite the fear. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear. Consider the metaphor of learning to swim. You don't learn to swim by reading about swimming. You don't learn to swim by watching others swim. You learn to swim by getting in the water. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's uncomfortable. But there's no other way. The same is true for overcoming fear. As we draw our time together to a close, I want to share with you what I believe is the most important truth about fear. Every single time you face your fears, you don't just change your circumstances, you change yourself. You become stronger, more resilient, more capable. Each act of courage, no matter how small, builds upon the last, creating a foundation of strength that nothing can shake. Let me tell you about someone who understood this truth deeply. In a small mountain village, there lived a master wood carver. For 40 years, he created beautiful pieces that sold in galleries across the country. One day, a young apprentice asked him how he could make such intricate, perfect carvings without fear of making a mistake. The old craftsman smiled and said, "I make mistakes all the time. The secret is not in avoiding mistakes. It's in knowing that I can handle them when they come." This simple wisdom contains a profound truth about fear. The goal isn't to become fearless. It's to become fear-capable. It's to develop such trust in your ability to handle whatever comes that fear loses its power to stop you. Think about the things that scared you as a child that don't scare you now. What changed? The things themselves didn't change, you did. You grew stronger, more capable, more experienced. The same process continues throughout your life if you allow it. But here's what many people don't understand about fear. It's not just an emotion to overcome, it's a teacher to learn from. Every fear you face has something to teach you about yourself, about your strengths, about your potential. Consider this. A fear of public speaking might be teaching you about your need to express yourself more fully. A fear of starting a business might be teaching you about your desire for creative freedom. A fear of vulnerability in relationships might be teaching you about your capacity for deep connection. What if you started seeing your fears not as obstacles to avoid, but as signposts pointing toward your growth? What if every fear that shows up in your life is actually life's way of saying, "Here's your next lesson. Here's your next opportunity to become more than you are"? There was once a mountain climber who discovered something fascinating about fear. He noticed that the more he climbed, the more his relationship with fear changed. It never went away completely, but it transformed from a paralyzing force into a focusing agent. The fear sharpened his attention, heightened his awareness, made him more alive to the present moment. He learned to see fear not as an enemy, but as a respected advisor, one whose counsel he could hear without being bound by it. This is the kind of relationship with fear that I want you to develop. Not one where fear is absent, but one where fear is present, but not dominant. Where fear is acknowledged, but not obeyed. Where fear is felt, but not followed. Let me share with you what I call the 7 commitments of fear mastery. These are promises you make to yourself. Commitments that will transform your relationship with fear forever. Commitment 1. I commit to feeling fear and taking action anyway, not waiting until the fear is gone, but moving forward with it as my companion. Commitment 2. I commit to seeing fear as information, not a command. When fear arises, I will ask, "What is this fear trying to tell me?" rather than automatically retreating. Commitment. 3. I commit to distinguishing between real dangers and imagined threats. I will not let my mind's tendency to catastrophize control my actions. Commitment 4. I commit to growing through discomfort. I understand that comfort is the enemy of growth, and I choose growth over comfort. Commitment. 5. I commit to learning from every experience where I face my fears. Whether I succeed or fail, I will extract the lesson and use it to become stronger. Commitment. 6. I commit to supporting others in facing their fears. I understand that courage is contagious, and by helping others, I strengthen my own courage. Commitment. 7. I commit to celebrating my acts of courage, no matter how small. I understand that acknowledging my progress builds momentum for further growth. These commitments aren't just words. They're a blueprint for transformation. They're a declaration that you're no longer willing to let fear write your story. Remember the question we started with? What if fear wasn't your enemy? What if it was actually a force for growth, a catalyst for change, a doorway to your greatest potential? Here's what I know to be true. The quality of your life will be determined by how you choose to relate to fear. Will you let it be your jailer or your teacher? Will you let it be a wall or a door? Will you let it define your limits or inspire your growth? The choice is yours. It always has been. And it's a choice you make not once, but every day, in every moment when fear appears. Tomorrow morning. When you wake up, fear will still be there. It will still whisper its cautious counsel, still try to keep you safe in your comfort zone. But now you have a choice. You can listen to it like a dictator whose commands must be obeyed, or you can hear it like an overprotective friend. Well-meaning, but not always right. You can choose to see fear not as a sign to stop, but as a sign that you're alive, growing, pushing your boundaries. You can choose to see it not as a warning of what might go wrong, but as an invitation to discover what might go right. Because here's the ultimate truth about fear. It's not trying to stop you, it's trying to make you unstoppable. Every fear you face makes you stronger. Every challenge you overcome makes you more resilient. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you expand your capacity for life. So I leave you with this challenge. Tomorrow, do one thing that scares you. Just one thing. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. Feel the fear, acknowledge its presence, and do it anyway. Then the next day, do another thing, and another. Build a practice of courage, one small act at a time. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate fear from your life. It's to stop letting fear eliminate life from your living. It's to create a life so big, so bold, so beautiful, that fear becomes background noise in the symphony of your existence. Your fear doesn't define you. Your courage does. And that courage is already within you, waiting to be awakened, waiting to be expressed, waiting to transform your life. The time is now. The person is you. The choice is yours. What will you choose?